With the release of Grief Mode in Black Ops 6 Zombies, I thought this would be a great time to go back and rank all 26 side modes in Call of Duty Zombies history. Side modes are simply just anything that isn't the traditional round-based experience. This would be something like Outbreak, Onslaught, Grief, Turned, etc. And there's many more that you may have never even heard of before, so we're going to be talking about that in this video. And we are going to be including even game modes that are LTMs and aren't even available to play anymore within Black Ops 6. This includes stuff like Jingle Hells, Deadlight, Greenlight, etc. But there may have been a few modes here or there from Black Ops Cold War that aren't available anymore, and I couldn't include it on the ranking because I just never played them. So without further ado, let's get right into the ranking. In dead last, in the number 26th spot, has to be Deadlight Greenlight from Black Ops 6 Zombies. This mode may have been one of the worst experiences I've ever had in Zombies, not because it was necessarily annoying to play, but it was just so soulless and painstakingly bad. This was a limited time mode added in with the Squid Game event to Black Ops 6 earlier this year, and it was a very simple premise where you had this doll that either gave you red light mode, dead light mode, or green light mode. Red light mode made it so the player had to stop moving or else they will end up losing points, and if they start to lose so many points that they have 0 points, they will start to then lose health. Dead light mode makes the zombies really fast and more aggressive, and then green light mode essentially just gives the player double points. And so the doll is just switching between these 3 different modes as you're playing. But what makes this mode so stupid is that there was actually a round limit to round 10. Once you get to round 10, you had to exfil. Now thankfully later in the life cycle they did expand this to round 20 on Citadel de Mort and round 50 on Liberty Falls, but for quite a while it was literally just till round 10, which made 0 sense. What is the point of playing this mode if within like 15 minutes you have to leave? There was nothing about it that was fun or exciting. It wasn't a challenge to get to that point. It was just something that you just kind of hop in, get to round 10, and that's about it. You couldn't do main Easter eggs, you couldn't do side Easter eggs. It was literally just play for a couple minutes and then you're done. But even with expanding the round limit, I still didn't see any interest in this mode. The challenge it was giving you was not an interesting challenge whatsoever. It was not a fun challenge. It just felt like a soulless mode that was heavily relying on the Squid Game IP in order to attract players to play it. And I was interested in it. I was hoping it was going to end up being fun or have a decent connection to the Squid Game series, but it ended up not really feeling that exciting whatsoever, and I just didn't care to play it that much whatsoever. And it's not even available anymore because it's an LTM. It was not a permanent mode, and that definitely detracts points from the mode as well, the fact that you can't even play it, and they'll probably never bring it back. It was also only on Citadel and Liberty Falls. For some reason they didn't put it on Terminus, even though Terminus was available at the time when this mode came out. I don't really understand what the decision making was behind that, but that was just how the mode was built. Before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to show off these really cool Call of Duty Zombies themed KontrolFreek thumbsticks that will help your accuracy in Call of Duty, but are also just incredibly comfortable and look amazing. And they even come with a Speed Cola and Deadshot Daiquiri perk can, which is so cool. The Speed Cola edition will also give you a digital code for an in-game cosmetic weapon charm in Black Ops 6 Zombies. Use code XpertFusion at the link in the description for 12% off on this and any other KontrolFreek products. Now let's get back to the video. In the number 25th spot is Nightmares from Black Ops 3. This is still one of the strangest things COD Zombies has ever done because it's obviously not really tied to Zombies itself. It's more so tied to the Black Ops 3 campaign. It's basically an alternate way to play the Black Ops 3 campaign. The story is a little bit different, not extremely different, but it's different enough to set itself apart. But the missions play almost the exact same. It's just that you're fighting zombies instead of other soldiers. You can definitely have a little bit of fun with this mode if you're playing with friends and you're just kind of messing around, but as an actual experience, I just don't really see the point of it. The story is not very good. It's definitely very deep. There's a lot of complexity to it, but I've never really enjoyed the storyline that this campaign was trying to tell. And the mission design is just not very good because obviously it wasn't designed with the zombies in mind. So the zombies just kind of feel thrown in there. They don't really organically mesh with the environment. To this day, I don't really know the point of this mode. I feel like they probably just threw it in as a way to pad out the content that Black Ops 3 has. I think this game already is stacked with content. I don't really think it needed any more, but I think this was just a way for them to be like, oh, we have this zombies campaign in this game, which was something they've never done before. So obviously that would garner a lot of hype and excitement, even if the mode itself turned out to really not be that cool. In the number 24th spot is going to be Duranfang and Terra Maldicta from Vanguard. I didn't really know what to call this mode because it's not really said to be a different mode, they're just maps in Vanguard, but obviously they don't play like traditional round-based zombies experiences, so I felt the need to include them in this list. They're basically a weird mix of Outbreak, Onslaught, and the Tortured Path, but it basically takes the worst elements of all of those three modes and doesn't keep any of the good elements, which is why this mode just doesn't work whatsoever. The mode still has rounds, but the way to progress the rounds is by doing these objectives, which you have to access by going through these portals in the main hub world, and Duranfang and Terra Maldicta have their own hub worlds. Usually, the separate worlds you teleport to are multiplayer maps, sometimes they're little locations from the campaign. In Terra Maldicta's case, it's literally just other areas of the hub world, which is kind of weird as well, but sometimes there's also other locations from the campaign that they use. Not a lot of original assets being used in this mode at all. Clearly, Vanguard as a whole was a rushed product when it comes to the zombies mode. There's also just not a lot of content to them. There's barely an Easter egg. I mean, Terra Maldicta kind of has an Easter egg, but it's like 5 minutes long and it doesn't feel exciting whatsoever. They also half-assed a round-based experience within both of these maps with the Void objective, where if you go into the Void objective, you kind of get a round-based experience inside of it, but again, it just feels kind of half-assed, and if you want to do anything like pack-a-punch your weapon or get perks, you have to go back through the teleporter into the hub world in order to do those things, and it just doesn't have that good classic round-based feel whatsoever. Even Treyarch knew this mode just wasn't going to work for Vanguard, so they ended up going back to the traditional round-based feel for the last two Vanguard maps. And I'm definitely glad they did, because those final two maps in Vanguard are actually not that bad. I actually enjoy playing them, whereas these first two maps I thought were just not very good. I do appreciate when they try new things with the zombies. I do think that's cool to see, but I really don't feel like this mode was trying new things. Like I said before, it was just taking the worst of previous modes we've already seen. So ultimately, it ended up being one of the worst experiences in Call of Duty Zombies history. In number 23 spot is Turned from Black Ops 2. I've heard a lot of people say they love Turned, and I honestly don't get it. I think this was a very boring game mode. It was very simple, fun for like 5 minutes, and then you basically never wanted to play again for at least another 10 years. This is a mode that lasts about 6 minutes long, and there's 4 different players. One player gets to be the human, whereas the other players are the zombie. And basically your goal as the zombie is to kill the human, and then you now become the human, and then that other player you just killed becomes the zombie. And you're basically just going back and forth like this as long as the match lasts, and trying to get as many points as possible. And whoever has the most points by the end wins the game. The one aspect of this mode that I actually do really like is the fact that every time you get a kill with a gun as a human, you do have to swap your weapon, so it's kind of like gun game from multiplayer. That aspect was pretty cool, but it was only playable on 2 different maps. You can only play it on Diner as well as on Buried, and like I said, it just got really boring really quickly. At the end of the day, it's basically a worse version of Infected, which of course is the multiplayer mode where everyone starts off as a regular human. One person is infected or a zombie, and that person has to kill as many other players as possible to turn them into zombies, and basically you want to be the last man standing. That mode is way better, and I'd much rather play that in multiplayer. Turned just kind of feels like a worse version of that. But I do think Turned could be made much better if they bring it back in the future. They just need to expand on it a bit, make it a bit more interesting. I could definitely see it working given the right mechanics and features. In number 22 spot is going to be Onslaught Elite. Now, I do have the other Onslaught modes much higher. I will talk about those later, but Onslaught Elite is by far the worst version of this mode. The only reason to play this mode is if you are camo grinding and you're trying to get specific camo challenges done that involve elite enemies, but I don't find this mode to be fun whatsoever. It's basically just regular Onslaught, but instead of having zombies spawn in, it's just one elite enemy per surge. And sometimes they'll throw in some extra enemies here or there, some zombies and stuff, and it's really just not that exciting. It plays so slowly, like it takes so long to get through the surges in this mode, and I just find it to be a lot less exciting than the regular version of Onslaught can be, so I barely end up playing it. Like I said, it's good for camo grinding, but I'm not going to rate a mode high just because it's good for camo grinding. In number 21 spot is going to be Outbreak Collapse. So again, there's different versions of Outbreak. This is just the Collapse version of it, which for those of you who don't know what Outbreak Collapse is. It's basically just this mode where you spawn into any of the outbreak regions and you have a 10-minute time limit in this region. You basically just go through 5 different waves of the zombies getting increasingly harder and harder. And there's literally nothing to do on the map. There's no objectives, none of the mini games. It's just survive as long as you can, and then once the 10 minutes is up, you have to go to the exfil site and try to exfil. And I actually think this concept could be really cool. The issue is that it's a 10-minute time limit. There's nothing fun about getting to play for like 10 minutes and then being like, okay, that's your time. That's just not how zombies should work. I do think the last like 2 minutes of this mode can be actually kind of fun. It does get quite intense, but when it comes to like the first 5, 6, 7 minutes, it's pretty boring. It's just very standard, kill zombies here or there, and that's about it. There's really nothing that exciting about it. But I do think those last few minutes can be kind of enjoyable. But I can't help but feel like this mode would have been 20 times better if they just didn't have a time limit. Why not just let players try to survive as long as possible in each of the regions? It would have basically been like a survival round-based experience on the outbreak regions. That would have been really cool and would have been a nice shakeup for the Cold War Zombies gameplay. But instead, they put this 10-minute time limit on it and make it so you have to leave after that point. And like I said, there really just isn't enough time to get engaged with it if you can only play for such a short period of time. In number 20, the spot is going to be Jingle Hells from Black Ops 6. Jingle Hells was also in Black Ops Cold War, but I honestly don't really remember playing it too much. I probably played it once and it's not available anymore, therefore I don't really have much to say about it. But Jingle Hells in Black Ops 6, I did play a few times and I thought it was okay. It does lose a lot of points just based on the fact that it is a limited time mode and will likely never return to the game. I still think that's a dumb thing to do. I don't care if it's a seasonal event. There's no reason why it can't just stay in the game. It was also only available on Liberty Falls, which made sense given the fact that they're not going to do this whole Christmas retheming for every single map, but I did actually enjoy the Christmas retheme of Liberty Falls. It actually made Liberty Falls a much more interesting location. It actually was much more fun and visually appealing. But the most interesting thing about this mode is that it's actually probably the closest to classic zombies that Black Ops 6 has ever seen, because they actually disabled quite a few things in the mode, such as the crafting table, the arsenal station, and even the mystery box, which obviously the mystery box being removed is not a classic thing whatsoever, so I kind of wish they left that in. But the reason why they decided to do that is because they wanted you to rely on the things that the zombies drop, and they even drop these presents every now and then that can give you a bunch of different weapons. But because of the fact that you don't have the arsenal station, you can't rely on your loadout gun. You can't rely on just getting salvage and then upgrading the rarity of it. You have to actually get the weapons that drop from the zombies and utilize those to help you out, which does make it feel more like classic zombies. There was also no armor drops from the zombies, so the only way to get more armor was to buy it off of the wall, which is obviously quite expensive. So basically you just weren't getting a lot of armor in this mode, which made the mode a lot harder. So in general, all of this sounds pretty cool. Like, it's actually a hardcore mode for this game basically, which is kind of something I've been wanting to see for a while. But the problem is that the special enemies, the zombies in general, the way they hit you in this game, and just the way the map is designed, was designed around the modern mechanics. It was designed around having a crafting bench, having the arsenal station, having all these different features. As much as I don't like those features, I think if you're going to remove them, you have to change around how the game works to make up for it. That's just the way game balance works. You can't just take away features that were in the developer's mind when they were designing these maps. In general, like I said, I did like the hardcore feel that this mode had, but I think the reason most people didn't enjoy it is because you just didn't have a game designed around not having those features and mechanics, so it just felt like a restricted version of the basic mode. And again, I want classic zombies back, but I really want a game that's fully designed around it, not just a subpar mode that is a limited time and not even something you're going to always be able to play anyways. I do love the frozen rounds they did though. Every now and then you'd have these special rounds where a blizzard would come in and you'd have to go inside, or else you'd be like significantly slowed down by the blizzard. I thought that was a really cool mechanic, and it's actually something I would love to see as like a core map feature. I think that would be really cool. I know some people would probably hate that. They think it's kind of annoying, but I think stuff like that is kind of fun and interesting and kind of just changes up the dynamic of how you play the map. Quite possibly the worst thing about this mode is the fact that they didn't let you do the main Easter egg, which I don't really understand why. There's really nothing in this mode that makes it so you just couldn't do the main Easter egg. I think it would be pretty cool if they had the ability to do it, so then you can kind of challenge yourself. You can kind of see if you can beat the Easter egg with these more hardcore mechanics. I think that'd be pretty fun, but they just didn't let you do it. In the number 19th spot, Outbreak Survival. So this was a very interesting new mode added for Outbreak where you actually spawn in with the classic starting pistol, the M1911. There's no loadouts. You cannot choose whatever gun you want. There's also no mini-map, which actually is quite interesting in Outbreak because you really have to learn the maps to know how to get around, because the mini-map is obviously one of the most useful features in open world zombies modes, especially Outbreak, if you want to know where the ammo crates are, where crafting benches are, where pretty much anything is on the map. So if you don't know with the minimap, you have to actually explore the map and look around instead of just pressing on the map and then just putting a waypoint to where you need to go. You actually had to rely on learning and exploration, which was really, really cool. And again, no loadouts is awesome. Like, you actually have to get other guns. You can't just rely on the gun you spawn with. This mode is literally like a wet dream to classic zombies fans. I know it's an Outbreak and not everyone likes Outbreak, but for me, that was awesome. But they ruined it with the no health regen feature. The fact that they had to throw in this extra thing where you have no health regen unless you eat food dropped by zombies. And we saw this same mechanic brought back into an LTM with Black Ops 6 zombies, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the mode could have been so much better if they just stopped at no loadouts and no minimap and just leave it at that. That would have been so much fun. I would have played this so much, but they just had to throw in that extra mechanic because it's not fun to have to eat food from the zombies every 5 seconds. It's not an enjoyable mechanic. I don't ever see a world where that's fun to do. It definitely could have been interesting if maybe you didn't have to hold X on the food, but you can't just walk over it. You have to hold X, so you're constantly tapping X every 5 seconds. I don't find that to be fun. But something that is really cool is that you can actually do the main Easter eggs in this mode, which is really awesome. Like, trying to do the main Easter eggs with this more hardcore feeling version of Outbreak can be cool, but at the same time, like I said, I don't like having to pick up food every 5 seconds. It's just not fun. Everything else about it, though, is pretty cool, and is actually one of the most interesting versions of Outbreak because of that. The number 18th spot is Zombie Snacks from Black Ops 6 Zombies, which of course is a mode that was taking some inspiration from Outbreak Survival with the whole idea of needing to eat snacks dropped from the zombies to regen your health. But they did add some extra stuff to it as well. There's this whole flow state thing where if you get this insane damage boost if you kill a bunch of zombies in a row without taking any damage, which is pretty cool. You can do a lot of damage with this, especially against the boss fights. And one of my favorite things about this is the music. There's actually a lot of good music that plays when you're in those flow states. The whole mode was meant to be 420 themed. That's the whole idea of eating these snacks, because obviously, you know, people like to eat a lot of snacks when they're high. That was kind of the whole joke that they were going with. And it's an interesting concept. Unfortunately, it is an LTM, so we're just never going to see it back unless they decide to bring it back towards the end of Black Ops 6's life cycle, maybe. But for now, it's just not available anymore because that's how limited time modes work. But to be honest, it's not like that exciting of a mode. I don't think I'd play it that frequently anyways. I just think it should be at least an option. But like I said, it's not that interesting. I don't love having to constantly pick up food from the ground. I don't think that's an interesting mechanic. But like I said, the flow state makes it at least more enjoyable. In number 17th spot, Onslaught Diminishing Light. So there was a lot of different versions of Onslaught, and unfortunately some of them aren't that great. This is one that I don't really think is bad necessarily. I just see no reason to play it over the original version of Onslaught. The only difference with Onslaught Diminishing Light is that the purple dome that you're in will actually close in as you are doing each surge. In regular Onslaught, the purple dome just stays still. It's not going to close in, but in this version, it is closing in as you're doing each surge, which definitely makes it more intense. You have some moments where it's closing in really, really tight. There's a lot of zombies coming at you and you have to finish that surge as quick as possible in order to survive. But I just don't see the point. Like, it's a little bit more of a challenge than regular Onslaught, but I'd rather just play regular Onslaught at that point. In number 16th spot, Cranked. Now, there are multiple versions of Cranked that I decided to kind of just stuff in this one placement because I don't really see the point of counting Cowabunga Cranked as a separate thing than Team Cranked. And then there's also Cranked 2 and Black Ops Cold War. They all play the same. There's basically no difference, except for the fact that Black Ops 6's versions of Cranked actually let you do the main Easter eggs, whereas the Black Ops Cold War version did not. So this is definitely a much better version of Cranked, and you also can play it on all maps, whereas in Cold War you can only play it on D Machine and Firebase C for some odd reason. Cranked is very simple though. You just have to kill zombies as fast as possible to stay alive. There's a timer, and if the timer goes out, you die. So you basically just have to make sure you're constantly killing zombies as quickly as you can. And that's okay here and there, but I really just don't see the point of playing it most of the time. I'd rather just play regular zombies. You're not really changing up your playstyle in a major way. All you're doing is just playing a bit faster. But again, I don't always want to play fast. I'm actually a big fan of playing slow in zombies sometimes. I like to take my time through the rounds. So playing a mode that forces you you to go quick isn't really the most appealing thing to me, but I don't really hate playing it either. It's just a very average mode. In number 15 spot, Dead Ops Arcade from Black Ops 1. I decided to include the different Dead Ops Arcade modes as separate spots on this ranking, and that means, of course, the original Dead Ops was going to be quite low on this list just because the sequels do pretty much everything better than this original version. I don't think there's a single thing about Dead Ops Arcade 1 that is better than 2 or 3. It's a very simple mode. You just kind of jump in and shoot zombies with this top-down view, and the rounds are relatively quick. After every 4 rounds, you go to a new area, and it just kind of keeps building up until you can fully complete it in the end. Dead Ops Arcade 1 is much shorter than 2 and 3, but it's also much harder. I think a big reason for that is because it's harder to see the zombies coming at you in Dead Ops Arcade 1 just because it's an older game, so it's a lot less clear. There's many times where there's a lot of visual clutter on the screen and I can't really clearly tell whether there's a zombie that's about to hit me or not, and of course it's a one hit to die in this mode. You have to completely avoid getting touched by the zombies at all in order to survive. And like I said before, I just don't really have many reasons to go back to it because I think 2 and 3 are just much better experiences in pretty much every single way. The arena locations as well as the enemies you fight against are also a lot less interesting than the enemies and arenas from Dead Ops Arcade 2 and 3. In number 14 spot, I have Onslaught, the original version of Onslaught. One of the worst things about this mode is the fact that it was actually exclusive to PlayStation players for the first year that Black Ops Cold War was out. You had to wait until Vanguard released in order to be able to play this on PC or Xbox. It was quite ridiculous, but once it did come out, it was a decently fun mode. I had some good times with it. The mode takes place on multiplayer maps from Black Ops Cold War, and you basically just have to follow around this purple orb that creates this dome which you have to stay inside of or else you will die. And it will stop at different areas of the map for just a little bit of time and then keep moving after you kill a certain amount of zombies. And you will basically go through different surges, which are basically different spots that the orb stops at. And the surges basically are like rounds from traditional zombies. So in a way, Onslaught kind of is like you're playing round-based zombies, but obviously you don't have stuff like the mystery box or a Wonder Fizz machine or perk machines in general or a Pack-a-Punch machine. The only way to get those items and upgrade your weapons is that every couple surges you will have a special enemy spawn in that you have to kill, and it will drop a bunch of stuff on the floor, stuff that can allow you to upgrade your weapons or upgrade your weapons rarity or just get new weapons entirely or perks or whatever it may be, and that is how you get all the things to try to help you to kill zombies. And I do think this mode can be pretty fun, but there are better versions of it that we will talk about a little bit later in the video. There's definitely better ways to play Onslaught. The original version though, it's totally fine, and I can definitely understand why a lot of people do love it. But I do feel like if they just took these multiplayer maps and turned them into traditional round-based experiences, kind of like what Nuketown Zombies was back in Black Ops 2, I think it would be a lot more fun. I would much prefer that, but this mode is still a decent time nonetheless. In number 13 spot, Onslaught Accelerated. This is quite literally the same as a regular Onslaught, but it's much faster. The surges go by much faster. And I know I mentioned before that sometimes I prefer a slower paced zombies experience, but when it comes to Onslaught, there's really no reason for it to be slower paced. There's really not much to do on the maps. You're just kind of killing zombies. So it being faster paced is much more fun, and it obviously allows you to just get through these surges much quicker, and you can kill a lot of zombies in a smaller amount of time. So I definitely prefer playing this over the original version of Onslaught, but surprisingly, there are even better versions of Onslaught than this. Trust me, we'll get to them later. In number 12 spot is going to be Onslaught Mystery Munitions. Like I said before, there's many different versions of Onslaught. This one is quite interesting, and I actually played it for the first time very recently. I never played it when it first came out, but basically the way this mode works is that it's just like Onslaught, but each surge you get a random weapon that it gives you, and you have to use that random weapon. There are no other weapons that you can pick up, and this is really interesting because you will get into a lot of situations, especially in the later surges, where you're stuck with a melee weapon or a launcher or something that's just not that great, and it actually makes for quite a unique situation to be stuck in. One of my biggest issues with modern zombies is the fact that there really isn't much randomness to the game because you get to spawn in with whatever gun you want and you just get a bunch of kills with that gun. There's really not much need to switch around and use different weapons and use a variety of weapons, but this mode forces you to use a variety of weapons, and it's quite fun to go through all the different ones. So I definitely think this is one of the best versions of Onslaught. If you're there for camo grinding, it's definitely not the best version of Onslaught for that, but just for some random fun, it's actually quite enjoyable. In number 11 spot is going to be Rush from Black Ops 4. So interestingly enough, Rush is basically the precursor to Onslaught. It kind of plays in a very similar way. The only difference is that it's on the round-based maps instead of being on multiplayer maps. You start off on the map and you basically have to go to different areas around the map that it tells you to go to and just survive in that area. And it'll just keep doing that endlessly. And the interesting thing about Rush is that it also is kind of a competitive mode where you compete against people that you play with. Of course, you can still play it by yourself, but if you play it with friends, you're competing to get more points than them, and there's a whole system around it where if you pick up a power-up, that power-up is only for yourself, so you're basically going against your friends here. It's honestly the best way to play Black Ops 4 if you just want a casual, simple experience. It's really not a complex mode whatsoever because you're literally just killing zombies the whole time, so if you're someone who really doesn't like complex maps, Rush is definitely a great mode to play, and I'm surprised that a lot of players just never even tried it out. It's also a great mode to try different weapons because guns are actually free in this mode. You just hit the mystery box for no points required. There really isn't a point system here. The points are just like the overall points that you're earning to compete against your friends, but you're not actually spending those points in anything. Doors just automatically open, wall buys are free, perks are free. All that stuff is just stuff you just get as you go through the map. I do think it can get repetitive after a little bit of time playing. I don't think it's that replayable, but it still is enjoyable nonetheless. In number 10 spot is going to be Onslaught Containment, the best version of Onslaught. So this is the best version because it's played on the gunfight maps instead of being played on the regular maps. And because the gunfight maps are very small, there is no purple dome that you have to stay inside of where you have to follow the orb around the map. Instead, you can actually just go wherever you want on these maps at all times, which basically makes this mode play like traditional round-based survival, just of course without the mystery box and the pack-a-punch machine and all that stuff. Just like with the other Onslaught modes, you have to wait till every couple surge ends for the special enemy to spawn in, and then you of course will get some free random loot out of that, and you can utilize the loot to help you out. And I think this is a very, very fun mode. It's great for camo grinding, and to be honest, it's just kind of relaxing. It's one of those modes where you just kind of kick back and just shoot zombies till you get bored, and it can get repetitive just like a lot of other modes on this list so far, but I still do think it is quite fun. It's definitely the best version of Onslaught, but I do think there are much better modes on this list, hence why it's only at the number 10 spot. In number 9 spot is going to be the Tortured Path. A lot of people count this as a map for some reason, but it's not a map. It's a mode that is playable on 3 different maps. And a lot of you might be surprised by my pretty high placement of this mode, considering I've definitely complained about this mode quite a lot in the past, but I've kind of grown to enjoy it a little bit more over the past year, to the point where I actually think it's not that bad of a mode, and I could actually have a decent amount of fun with it. Of course, I do prefer the survival versions of the Tortured Path maps, but the Tortured Path mode itself can be kind of fun here or there. So the way this mode works is that you have to go through 10 rounds of zombies, technically 11 rounds, it kind of ends on the 11th round, and a few of those rounds are going to have an objective that you have to do in order to get past that round. Now, sometimes the objectives are pretty fun, sometimes they're not so fun. There's objectives such as killing specific special enemies, there's objectives that involve defending objectives on the map, and a few others, and a lot of people don't like objective-based zombies. I'm not a big fan of it most of the time either, but I don't really mind these objectives as much as something like Duran Fung and Terra Maldicta, because you don't have to do the objective every single round, it's just every couple rounds. And once you get to round 10, you have to do a boss fight. Now, the first 2 maps, Into the Storm and Across the Depths, do not have good boss fights whatsoever. They're very simple, they're very easy, and you're fighting a boss that's already previously in the game. It's not something unique, but the third map, Beneath the Ice, actually has a pretty decent boss fight against the Guardian, not to be mistaken for the Citadel More Guardian. This was the OG Guardian, and it's actually a decent boss fight. It's not like incredible or anything like that, it's pretty short, but it is still an enjoyable boss fight with some pretty interesting mechanics. There's also, of course, the Easter egg, which is available on each of these maps, and you technically have to do them in order without fail in order to get the full rewards, but once you get the rewards, you can actually do them in any order you want. After that, it doesn't really matter. Doing them in order is just to actually get the full reward. And although I really don't like the Easter egg for Into the Storm, the first map, I actually really do enjoy the Easter eggs for the second and third map, Across the Depths and Beneath the Ice. They're not amazing Easter eggs by any means, they're very short and some of the steps are a bit iffy, but some of it is really, really fun to try to master. I've recently did it for the first time this past year, and I had a lot of fun trying to learn it. It took a long time. There's a lot of things you have to get perfectly right, but I like that. I like difficult Easter eggs. And so even though it's definitely not one of the best Easter eggs ever, it's definitely towards like the mid, maybe even bottom of my ranking, it still is an Easter egg that I got a pretty decent experience out of. The Tortured Path also has a pretty interesting rank system where if you reach rank 50, you unlock a new mode called Darkened Path, which is basically a harder version of the Tortured Path maps, which is quite an interesting reward to unlock. There's also this really cool system where every single time you beat a map, not necessarily the Easter egg, but just like beating the regular version of the Tortured Path maps, you get an attachment on a random weapon that will give you a damage increase on that specific weapon in the Tortured Path. I think this is so cool because it gives you a reason to keep replaying the Tortured Path map so you can try to unlock this attachment for every single gun in the game. I personally have probably done it at least 30 times by now, so having this attachment on 30 different weapons is pretty cool, and I definitely enjoy having grinds like this in the game, giving players a reason to just keep playing the mode again and again to get even better weapons in the mode. But you only get to use that attachment within the Tortured Path. You can't use it in the round-based maps. There's also a pretty cool unique mechanic to this map with randomized wall buys, which essentially is a specific class of weapons that is on the wall that you can purchase for a specific amount of points, and it'll just give you a random weapon from that class. We've never seen something like this on any other zombies map, so I think that's pretty cool. And even though I'm just ranking the Tortured Path mode itself here, I do think the existence of these survival versions of these maps makes this mode a lot better because there's less pressure put on this mode. You're not going to be playing the Tortured Path trying to get a traditional round-based experience because that experience is already given to you through the survival map, so there's really no reason to expect that from the Tortured Path. Overall, not the best thing in zombies, obviously, but I think it's much better than people give it credit for, and I've definitely been enjoying it more and more over the years, and I definitely do see myself going back to it just for fun every now and then. In number 8 spot is going to be Grief from Black Ops 6, specifically that version of Grief. We are ranking this separately from Black Ops 2's Grief because they are quite different. Black Ops 6 brought back Grief and changed it quite a bit by adding these objectives that you have to compete against the other team with, and whoever loses the objective gets a specific grief put upon them. And there's different types of griefs that you can get. One of them is slowing you down in this blizzard storm. Another one forces you to lose your weapon with the weapon carousel. So it's quite interesting how this mode works in this game, but I don't think it's nearly as good as Black Ops 2's Grief because of the modern zombies mechanics. I just don't think they're nearly as fun with Grief. I think Grief works better when you have more tighter maps with the zombie AI that Black Ops 2 had, without a bunch of get out of jail free cards, and with overall just having those classic features like the classic point system. The biggest problem with Black Ops 6's Grief is that there is no private matches available, which was also the best part about Black Ops 2's Grief. Getting to play against your friends in a private match was the main thing that was fun about it. Getting to do Grief tournaments and Grief leagues and all these fun things we did back in the day, you just can't do with Black Ops 6's version anymore. But regardless of all of that, I still am enjoying Grief quite a bit in Black Ops 6. They've made a lot of good updates over time. They've nerfed certain things, such as the melee, which was really annoying when the mode first launched. You could just absolutely spam people with the melee attacks, and it was quite frustrating, but they've nerfed that, so it's much more balanced now. And they've also nerfed some of the field upgrades specifically in this mode and buffed the zombies. So they're basically just making it a lot harder so the games don't last nearly as long, which is definitely a good thing. But I still think nothing is going to make this mode nearly as good as BO2's Grief, as long as there's no private matches available and the existence of gobblegums. The fact that you can use gobblegums in this is just not fun whatsoever. I know they restricted a few of them, but they definitely need to restrict even more of them. Any gobblegum that lets you revive your teammates in an easier way, such as Phoenix Up, definitely needs to be banned from this mode. There's no reason why I should be playing Grief and it's a 4v1. The other team only has one guy left, but he pops a Phoenix Up and saves his entire team just like that. That is just not fun whatsoever. When you have stuff like that happen, it really does ruin the enjoyment of this mode. But like I said, it still is pretty fun. It's definitely the best mode in Black Ops 6. I mean, all the other modes were limited time anyways, so you can't even play them anymore. But Grief was definitely a welcomed addition to Black Ops 6. I love all the different arenas as well. The fact that there's 11 different maps that you can play on for Grief is really cool. Grief back in Black Ops 2 only had 4 different arenas you can play on, so that was definitely a huge improvement with Black Ops 6. I can definitely appreciate that. In number 7th spot is going to be Operation Deadbolt from Modern Warfare Zombies. So it was a really hard choice to choose between this and a different open world zombies mode that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but I decided to put this in 7th spot behind that mode because of a few major flaws. First of all, the fact that this mode is limited time, you only get 45 minutes in the mode and then you have to exfil, or of course you can go to the different Dark Ether rifts and just spend a little bit more time there, but in general, you still are at limited time. You can't be playing for hours upon hours and just take your time through the mode. You have to leave when the game wants you to leave. That is a huge problem with this mode, and it does negatively affect it quite a bit. Also, the fact that there's no solo mode really sucks, especially because it likely means this mode is going to be dead in a few years. When there's not enough players trying to find matches in this mode, you're not going to be able to get into any lobby of this game. Even now, only a year after this mode came out, it's still pretty hard to find lobbies currently. Sometimes it'll take upwards of 4 minutes to finally get into a lobby, and there's just no way to play solo. At the very least, when the life cycle ended, they should have gave the players a solo mode, and there's no reason why we couldn't have that. There really wouldn't be any negative effect on the mode by having a solo mode. It would only make the mode better and more replayable long term. I don't want to have to always have other players in my lobby, even though they don't really affect the lobby that much in a negative way. Just the fact that you have to load into a lobby with other players is quite frustrating and is going to kill the mode long term. I also think the map of Urzikstan that you play on is quite boring. It is not an interesting location whatsoever. It's not interesting in Warzone, and it's definitely not interesting in Zombies. I'm genuinely so bored of that location, but the different Dark Ether rifts that you go to were pretty interesting just because they were in the Dark Ether. I mean, Al Mazrah itself is not that interesting of a location, but because you had the whole Dark Ether aesthetic going on, some of it was pretty cool, especially the last Dark Ether that they did, where there was like floating vehicles and a bus and a train and all this stuff floating in air. It was pretty cool, and I definitely enjoyed that, but pretty much everything else about the main map itself, I don't find to be interesting at all. A really important aspect of open world games is the exploration, and I just felt like this mode never really fully utilized that. I never really feel like there's much to explore because most of the map kind of looks the same. And easily the worst thing about this mode is the fact that it was the only content in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. The fact that it was the only thing you can play in that game put a lot of pressure on this being the best it can possibly be. It put a lot of pressure on the different DLC updates that this mode got, to the point where it just was never enough. Fans were not happy with most of the updates throughout this game's lifecycle because you needed to do much bigger changes and much bigger updates to really get people invested long term with this same mode. But if this game had other round-based maps or other modes available, even just Onslaught on the multiplayer maps would have been nice. It would have definitely taken a lot of the pressure off of Operation Deadbolt itself, but because this was the only thing available in this game, it really did hurt it. And that is the main reason I'm putting this below the other open world zombies experience that we will talk about in a little bit. I also just didn't like a lot of the different gameplay mechanics of this mode. I didn't like the schematic system. I didn't like the fact that you were looting and then you had to take the stuff and exfil with it, and then you can come back and spawn in with those same items. That overall gameplay flow got very stale to me very, very fast. But with that being said, I cannot lie, there was a lot to do in this mode. There was a lot to grind for. There was a lot of rewards, and some of it was actually very fun to go for here or there. It really just depends. I think when they added the first Dark Ether Rift in Season 1, that was one of the most exciting updates of this game because it was pretty cool getting to fight this giant Dark Ether worm in the Dark Ether, and then you had the different schematic rewards behind it, which, like I said, I didn't like the schematic system, but I did like the rewards themselves. They were unique items that you can get, and of course they added the VR11 Wonder Weapon that season, and that was pretty cool. It was a cool update. It was a cool addition to this mode, and then even the Season 5 update with the Entity boss fight was pretty cool. Like, there's a lot of fun boss fights in this game. You also have the Red Worm boss fight called Greylorm, which is probably one of the most insane experiences you can get in Zombies ever. I mean, you can't have this type of experience anywhere else in Zombies, where you get a whole lobby of players. I'm talking 20 plus players all shooting at a giant worm that's attacking everyone at the same time. Of course, the game couldn't handle it that well. Usually it would lag a lot if you had this sort of thing going on, but it was still pretty fun, and like I said, an experience that you really can't get anywhere else. Overall, the potential was there, and it was clearly a fun mode from time to time. I did enjoy playing it throughout its life cycle, but in general, it's not a mode that I'm going to be revisiting much at all in the future, and I definitely don't want to see a mode like this again, especially as the only experience in that game. I definitely think we deserve more content than just this one singular open world experience. I want to see a couple different round-based maps, and then you have the open world zombies experience as a separate sandbox type mode that takes all the content from the round-based maps and kind of pushes it into this open world experience. That is the best way to do it. Unfortunately, this game did not do that. In number 6 spot, Outbreak from Black Ops Cold War. So the reason I have Outbreak above Modern Warfare Zombies is mainly because it is not the only zombies experience in this game. There is multiple of other modes and maps that you can play in Black Ops Cold War. Not saying that there's enough other content. I've definitely complained about that with Black Ops Cold War before, that there was only 4 round-based maps, and it felt like Outbreak did kind of take a little bit of development away from a lot of the other things in this game. But in general, just the fact that this isn't the entire game definitely holds it up quite a bit. You can play it and enjoy it and still have Onslaught and the other round-based maps in this game to enjoy, and even of course Dead Ops Arcade 3. And also you can actually play it solo for an unlimited amount of time. You don't have to exfil after 45 minutes. So that does make Outbreak a little bit better in my opinion. But when just comparing Outbreak versus Operation Deadbolt on its own, I do think Operation Deadbolt has more content to it. There's more depth to it. There's more to do. There's more to grind for. But I don't think that makes it necessarily a better mode as a whole, especially because we have to take into account what content is in the rest of the game. How does it work as a side mode? The way this mode works is you have different waves, and the only way to get to the next wave is by doing the main objective on each region. Now, when you go to a new wave, it brings you to a new region, and there's a bunch of different regions that you get to play in. Some of them are much better than others. Regions like Armada are really fun, but then there's many other regions that are just not nearly as interesting or fun to play in. There's also mini objectives that aren't required to go to the next area, but they're definitely useful to do because they give you a lot of points and they give you loot. So sometimes you're going to want to do them if you want to be well prepared within the later waves. The best thing about Outbreak is the 2 Easter eggs that you can do. Usually Easter eggs are the things I care about the most in zombies, so being able to do 2 different Easter eggs in Outbreak is pretty cool. The second Easter egg is not that good, to be honest. You get to fight the Orda at the end, and it's not a very good boss fight. It's very anticlimactic, it's very easy, and everything leading up to it is not that exciting. The first Easter egg is much better. The steps leading up to it is not incredible, but once you get to the bunker, it's actually pretty good, and I would argue probably the best Easter egg in Black Ops Cold War. Some of those steps in the bunker can get very intense. And then it all leads to the Legion boss fight, which is definitely one of the hardest boss fights in modern zombies. I personally don't love this boss fight like a lot of other people. I've talked to people who think this is the best boss fight in zombies history, and I personally don't understand that. I think it's fun, I think it's decent because of its challenge, but it's not nearly as challenging as it was when it first came out. They have nerfed it since the launch, so it's not nearly as hard anymore, but in general, it still is an interesting boss fight. Its time limit is really the main enemy there. If you didn't have a time limit, it would probably be much easier, but because there's a time limit, you are really scared the whole way through. You really want to rush, and usually rushing leads to your death most of the time, which is definitely an interesting mechanic for a boss fight to have. Not my favorite thing they could have done for this boss fight, but still a decent boss fight nonetheless. The elements that work best in Outbreak is when it truly feels like you're playing in a giant sandbox of all the Black Ops Cold War content. Now, I think this mode would be even better if they utilized sandbox elements from Black Ops 4 as well, which Black Ops 4 elements were used in other parts of Black Ops Cold War, specifically in Dead Ops Arcade 3, which we'll talk about later in this video, but I really wish those elements were also used in Outbreak, because to be honest, a lot of these sandbox elements of Black Ops Cold War are not that interesting. So you're fighting against bosses from Black Ops Cold War, you're using wonder weapons from Black Ops Cold War, and all of that just didn't really excite me. But if we were getting to play against Black Ops 4 bosses, like imagine the elephant from 9 coming at you on one of these maps, or coming across a gladiatorial arena in the open world where there's different bosses from 9 there. Like, stuff like that would have been really, really cool. So I really wish they utilized some of the Black Ops 4 assets in this mode, maybe even for some of the regions. Like, Like imagine the Alcatraz map from Blackout being used as a region in Outbreak. That would have been incredible. Stuff like that would have definitely got me much more interested in Outbreak. But as it was, I thought it was just a decent mode that definitely had its moments here or there. I definitely think it had way more potential than anything, and I really hope that open world zombies can become something much crazier in the future. As much as, like I said before, I'm not a huge fan of open world zombies, I definitely think it can work. I just don't want to see it take away any development from round-based zombies. I love round-based zombies way too much. In number 5th spot, Gauntlet from Black Ops 4. So Gauntlet was one of those modes that a lot of people didn't like during its life cycle, but nowadays I hear people saying more positive things about it, and a lot of people even want it to return. I definitely do think there were some issues with it, don't get me wrong, but overall it was a very, very fun mode. The way this mode worked is that you were able to play on any of the round-based maps in the game, and you were given a challenge per round. So you had 30 rounds in total, and you had to complete that challenge on that specific round. Now, sometimes the challenge would be more gameplay based, like for example, having to get crouch kills, or having to use specific classes of weapons like SMGs, or having to go to a specific area of the map and survive in that area for the entire round. All sorts of challenges like that. But then there was also ones that were more progression based, where you had to have either all your perks by that specific round, or maybe a pack-a-punched weapon by the end of the round, or you had to have the shield built by the end of the round. There was a lot of things like that as well, and I think the gameplay based challenges were definitely more fun and made more sense. Having progression based challenges sometimes got you in a position where you lost only because you weren't getting through the map fast enough, but I do kind of enjoy that because it does make it more replayable. You have more of a reason to come back and play Gauntlet again and again and again. You're not very likely to complete Gauntlet on your first attempt because you have to really understand what the challenges are like to be able to properly set up for them. For this mode, I do think some maps are much better than others for it. I do think 9 and Ancient Evil have the best gauntlets because they end in a boss fight. Well, it's literally just the Easter egg boss fight brought over into the gauntlet mode, but it's still a really cool way to end it off, the fact that you have to actually complete the boss fight in the end. And it does change up how you go about it quite a bit, because sometimes the challenges leading up to the boss fight could kind of mess up your progress a little bit. Like for example, there's a weapon carousel challenge at round 26 that has you swap between a bunch of different weapons, and whatever weapon you end on will be the weapon that you have to stick with. So you're basically going to lose the weapons that you had before that. So if you spend a bunch of time pack-a-punching a weapon, you kind of wasted your time and your money because you now have to have a different weapon the next round, and you're only a few rounds away from the boss fight. But I think that's pretty fun. Like, I actually enjoy how frustrating this mode can be sometimes when it comes to not being properly set up for it and then having to come back later and try again when you better learn it. There's a lot to master there, and I think having a mode where there's a lot to master is pretty cool. But I do think if Gauntlet ever returns to zombies, they definitely should change up how it works by making it so the challenges are randomized. I do think it would be a little bit more interesting if you had a completely different challenge set up every single game, and if the challenges were more gameplay based. But for what Black Ops 4's Gauntlet was, I do think it was quite enjoyable. It was a very different way to play the round-based maps while still feeling like you're playing round-based zombies. The maps still kind of played similarly to how they did previously. Definitely underrated mode that I definitely think you all should give it a shot. I also wish there was better rewards. I think if it had better rewards, it would definitely been a much better mode. In the number 4 spot, boss battles from Infinite Warfare. So this is a really interesting game mode because you're just playing the boss fights from the Easter eggs separately. If you want to just jump right into the boss fight, not have to do the full Easter egg, you can do that here. And I think it's such a cool idea for a mode because as much as I love Easter eggs, I love doing them, especially in Infinite Warfare, I don't always want to do them. Sometimes I just want to jump right into the boss fight, test out different weapons, test out different perk combinations, and just see what the best way to kill each boss is. This mode allows for that. This mode really does allow you to just keep attempting the boss fight in different ways, seeing how fast you can do it, and it's a really fun mode because of that. I do wish there was more rewards put into the mode, maybe like certain speedrun rewards. If you complete the boss fights under a specific amount of time, you get different cosmetic rewards. That would be really cool, but in general, this is something that I have no idea how we haven't seen it return. The fact that it's not in Black Ops 6 is crazy to me. I think it makes sense that they wouldn't throw this in right away because obviously they want you to be able to experience the Easter eggs themselves. They don't want people people to do the boss fights before doing the Easter egg. But what could be cool is that once you complete the Easter egg, then you get this mode unlocked. So if you want to do Patient 13 without doing the full Easter egg, you just have to beat the Easter egg once, and then you could always just go to this mode just to do the boss fight. Stuff like that would be really awesome and would definitely be a welcome addition to Call of Duty, just like it was with Infinite Warfare Zombies. In number 3 spot, Grief from Black Ops 2. I was so excited to see Grief come back in Black Ops 6 because of how much fun I had back in the day on Grief in Black Ops 2. But the best part about it was the ability to do private matches, which is why this is so much higher than Black Ops 6's Grief. Private matches is what made this work, getting to play against your friends, doing 2v2s, 3v3s, sometimes 4v4s if you got enough people on, or even just playing public matches was still fun enough in this game. It was unfortunate that it wasn't available on that many maps. You only had it available on Mob of the Dead with the Subblock map. You also had it available on Town, Farm, and Buried, but I wish it was on more maps. It would have been pretty cool if they cut out a section of Origins for this, or even Die Rise would have been really fun, but they just decided not to do that for some reason. And the classic mechanics of Black Ops 2 just work so much better with Grief. The way the zombie AI works, the way you can train them, the way the traps worked, especially on the Subblock map, was so much fun. Trying to lure people into the cafeteria so you can use the acid trap and try to kill them with it. Stuff like that is what made Grief such a great time. And of course, you had PhD Flopper available on the Subblock Grief map as well, and it wasn't available in any other part of this game other than, of course, Origins, but you didn't have the physical perk machine. I guess you also had it as a perma perk on Buried, but again, there was no physical perk machine there, but there was a physical perk machine on Mob of the Dead with Subblock. So I just have so many memories of getting the Mustang and Sally, getting PhD Flopper, and just having a blast on this version of Grief. And you also didn't have Juggernog on the Subblock Grief map as well, which made it a lot harder to stay alive, which made it a lot more fun overall. And I always knew that no matter how fun Black Ops 6 Grief can possibly be, it's just not going to feel the same as this version of Grief because of the newer mechanics. We really need more classic mechanics back in order for it to work a lot better. In number 2 spot, Dead Ops Arcade 2 from Black Ops 3. I am such a sucker for the later editions of Dead Ops Arcade, and Dead Ops Arcade 2 is so much fun. It is a huge improvement over Dead Ops Arcade 1, to the point where I have to convince a lot of people to go back and play Dead Ops Arcade 2 because so many people just didn't even bother playing it because they didn't really enjoy Dead Ops Arcade 1, but I've made it very clear to a lot of people that it's much better and much more fun. There's just way more content overall. There's way more power-ups, more vehicles, more weapons, more arenas, and also more rounds. You go up to round 48 instead of just to round 40, and there's a lot of mini games included within the game as well, which I thought was really fun. Some people don't like these mini games and they think it kind of messes up the pacing of the mode. I disagree. I think the mini games are a lot of fun. The racing mini game is a lot of fun to do with friends, but even alone, it's just fun to try to test how fast you can do it, and you obviously get better rewards the quicker you go. There's a lot more challenge rounds, a lot more special enemies in general, a lot more hazards. There's just so much more to Dead Ops Arcade 2, and one of the best parts about it is the first-person drops. Now, there is not a first-person mode in Dead Ops Arcade 2, but you will get this drop every now and then that puts you into first-person mode for at least like 60 seconds, and it's pretty cool. It's nice to get to play in first-person mode for a bit. Even though there isn't a full mode centered around that like we see with Dead Ops Arcade 3, it still is pretty cool in general. Something that's so special about the Dead Ops Arcade modes is just how challenging they are. Getting to the end of it is quite literally one of the hardest achievements in COD Zombies history, to the point where I personally have never actually beaten any of the Dead Ops Arcade modes, but I still love them this much. I've gotten close many times, but I've never actually fully beaten them, and I definitely would love to do that someday. But like I said, they're just huge challenges. It takes a long time to get to that point, and it takes a long time to master this mode. Dead Ops Arcade 2 is definitely one of my favorites of them, but of course it is not the best one. In the number 1 spot has to be Dead Ops Arcade 3 from Black Ops Cold War. Dead Ops Arcade 3 is not only my favorite side mode in COD Zombies history, but it's also one of my favorite Zombies experiences ever, like quite literally in my top 10 of all time. There's a few things that put Dead Ops Arcade 3 above the others. The first big thing is the first person mode. So unlike Dead Ops Arcade 2, which only had first person mode available through those drops, there literally is a full mode dedicated to just first person in Dead Ops Arcade 3, which is the way I prefer to play Dead Ops Arcade 3, but it is of course a bit easier, so if you want the challenge, it's definitely better to play the regular version, but I just enjoy the first person aspect. I think it's cooler to get to see the different special enemies up close and get to explore the maps in the wild area within the first person mode, but like I said, it is easier, so if you don't want it to be easier, then like I said, probably don't play this mode. There's also the Wild, which is such a cool addition to this mode. Every now and then you will get sent to this basically open world that you get to explore called the Wild. And it's this giant area that almost reminds me of a lot of those classic arcade games where you get to explore this large area. And that's what it feels like here, because there is so much to explore. And it works in an interesting way where some areas are locked and you need keys to access them. So you might have to go to different areas of the Wild to try and get keys. There's different bonus rooms you can go in, there's dungeons you can explore, there's different bosses you can come across, such as the elephant from the map 9 in Black Ops 4, which that's a whole nother thing I love about Dead Ops Arcade 3 is the fact that it's utilizing a lot of Black Ops 4 assets in this mode. Of course, this is in Black Ops Cold War, but I guess because they were developing Dead Ops Arcade 3 right after Black Ops 4 came out, they decided to just use a bunch of stuff from Black Ops 4, which is much cooler. I think Black Ops 4's bosses are a lot more fun than the Black Ops Cold War bosses. There are some Black Ops Cold War content in here. It's just mostly Black Ops 4. I mean, there's even the gladiators from 9. The werewolf from Dead of the Night is here. Like, there's so many different bosses you get to fight from Black Ops 4, which is so much fun. This is like a giant sandbox experience, including just like everything from Black Ops 4. There's some sections of the Wild where you have to do parkour to get different rewards. Stuff like that is just so replayable. And this mode is also much longer than previous Dead Ops arcades because you have 64 regular rounds instead of either 40 or 48. And even once you beat this mode, you can still continue playing after round 64, and the zombies just get increasingly harder and harder and harder. Like I've said, I've never been to that point before, but I think it would be really fun to get to that point, even if it takes a long time to do. In general, there's so many aspects of Dead Ops Arcade 3, especially with the Wild, that I think would work really well even in round-based zombies. Just the idea of having a bunch of hidden rooms, booby traps, area-specific special enemies, all of that stuff is incredible, and it all is in Dead Ops Arcade 3. And then even just the actual mode itself, the different arenas, the different items, the weapons you get to use, everything is so much better than the previous versions of Dead Ops Arcade. It is definitely a massive improvement, and I cannot wait for Dead Ops Arcade 4 that is likely going to be coming out with Black Ops 7 this year. That is going to do it for this ranking. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. How would you rank all of these side modes in COD Zombies history? I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.